What's it going to cost to re-roof your house this year? Well, sit down and buckle up because I don't have good news for you. I'm going to give you some basic information about what it's going to cost to replace your roof, but I'm going to give you some additional information that will possibly change the final cost of your re-roof project, either higher or lower, depending on what needs to happen on your specific project. Now, I'm going to tell you right up front that the price to re-roof a house has been going up 15 to even up to 25% every year since 2020, and I don't expect that this year is going to be any different. So you might be saying, well, hey, Mr. Roofer, aren't you in control of this? Why are you raising your prices so much? Well, that's a completely fair question, and the answer is mostly related to things that are completely out of the control of your roofing contractor. For example, prices of material have been increasing 3 to 5 times every year for the last 4 years. And there's another price increase expected here in just a few weeks. And it's kind of curious because every shingle manufacturer raises their prices by the same percentage on the same day every single time. Kind of makes you wonder.
You don't find that suspicious?
But also because the cost of living is skyrocketing right now, the crews that actually do the labor need to charge more. So like I said, these things are pretty much outside of the control of the roofing contractor, and the roofing contractor has to price his jobs accordingly, factoring in the increased price of materials and the increased price of labor. So that's the short answer to why the cost to re-roof a house is getting so expensive. Now, first I'm going to give you a disclaimer because my business is in central Colorado and prices for materials and prices for labor may be different, maybe even a lot different than where you are. So the prices that I'm going to be explaining to you throughout this video might be different, but what I'm going to give you is kind of a baseline that you can expect. But if materials cost less or labor costs less where you live, or materials cost more or labor costs more where you live, that's going to affect the final price of your re-roof project. So you've got to take those things into consideration also when you're planning out a budget for your re-roof project. Next, all roofs are not created equal. Some are bigger than average, some are smaller than average. Some have just regular asphalt shingles on them, some have more luxury materials. Some of them are easy to access and easy to walk on. Some of them are a lot higher and a lot steeper. So the purpose of this video isn't going to be to try to talk about every different type of roof or every different roofing situation there is. What I'm going to do is talk about just a standard one-story roof with asphalt shingles, kind of like this one. But like I said, I'm also going to give you some additional information. These are going to be additional factors that you're going to have to take into account that will probably increase the final cost of your roof project. But first, we kind of need to talk about what if your roof is part of an insurance claim? Is that going to affect the cost? Well, if your roof is part of an insurance claim, there's going to be basically 3 out-of-pocket expenses for you. Number 1 is going to be your deductible. Number 2 could be any homeowner maintenance things that might show up either before or during the project. So for example, if your roofer gets the roof torn off and finds some of the wood is rotted and needs to be replaced, that could be an out-of-pocket expense. The other one is if there are any upgrades that you want to do. For example, if you want to upgrade from a standard shingle to an impact-resistant shingle, then your insurance company is not going to pay for that. That's going to be an out-of-pocket expense for you. So once again, your deductible, any maintenance that needs to be done that your insurance is paying for, and any upgrades that you want to do. Those are going to be out-of-pocket expenses for you. But for the most part, the rest of the cost of your roof is going to be paid for by your insurance claim, so you don't really need to worry about those costs. Okay, remember I told you that all roofs are not created equal? So if you're paying for your roof out of your own pocket, let's talk about the different factors that are going to weigh in and possibly cause the final price of your re-roof project to increase. And then after that, I'm going to explain what the standard base price could be for our average 2,400 square foot, one-story roof. And then you can kind of look at the projected costs of these other factors do the math, and come to a pretty close calculation of what your re-roof project could potentially cost, all right? So let's get started. Well, factor number one that could increase the cost of your re-roof project is whether or not you have to do certain things to meet code requirements. And one of the biggest ones is whether or not you might need ice and water shield. So if ice and water shield is required by code where you live, or if your roofer is just recommending that you install ice and water shield because of certain factors that he's seeing pertaining to your roof, then that's going to increase the total price of your project. But what is ice and water shield and why might you need it? Well, ice and water shield is a membrane, sometimes a rubberized membrane, that goes at vulnerable areas on your roof to help protect it against leaks. Oftentimes this is at the eaves of the house, in the valleys, along walls, and around your penetrations. So like I said, code may require that in certain areas of the country. Not only may code require it in certain areas of the country, but those different areas may require it on different parts of your roof. And so how much ice and water shield is required on your roof is also going to affect the total final price. Because if you're in an area that requires ice and water shield in a lot of areas on your roof, then that's going to obviously increase the amount of ice and water shield that you need to have installed. So kind of as a ballpark figure, depending on how much ice and water shield is needed, if it is needed, that could increase the price of your project anywhere from between $1,000 to $3,000. Hey, if you're getting quotes from roofers and maybe it's a little confusing to you, maybe you're having troubles making sense out of them, and you'd like an objective set of eyes just to look at it and help make sense of it for you, then feel free to reach out to us. Send us an email at info@homesteadroofingcolorado.com. We'll see what we can do to help you. Factor number two that is probably going to affect the final total price of your re-roof project is the complexity of your roof. And so any increasing complexity of the roof is more than likely going to increase the cost of the labor to do the roof. Not only that, but it's going to increase the total amount of waste that there is related to your re-roof project. But what do I mean by a complex roof? Well, is it high? Is it steep? Is it really cut up? And by cut up, I mean that there's just a lot of facets and a lot of angles. So if your roof looks like this, then it's probably going to cost a lot more per square foot than if your roof looks like this. But there's also varying degrees of complexity. For example, what if your roof is steep, but it's not high? What if your roof is really cut up, but it's not steep? Or what if your roof is really high, but it's not steep or cut up? So all of that has a bearing on what your final price is. And if your roof is high and steep and really cut up, then you can expect to pay even more per square foot for that re-roof project. So how much might you expect that a complex roof could add to your project? Like I say, it kind of depends on how complex your roof is. You could expect that it could add maybe as little as $300 or maybe even as much as $2,000 to $3,000. It all kind of depends on what's going on your roof. Factor number three that is probably going to affect the final price of your re-roof project is whether or not you need any new decking. Well, what is decking? Well, that's the wood that's on your roof underneath the shingles and the underlayment. That's the surface that your shingles get nailed to. So oftentimes your roofer may not even know if you need any new decking until he gets the roof torn off and exposes the decking underneath it. We just got done redoing a roof, and when we got the shingles torn off, that's when we discovered that the decking was in pretty bad shape. A lot of it had been delaminated, meaning that pieces of the plywood had gotten torn off from previous roofers, and the thickness of the decking was down to 1/8 of an inch. And there were also large holes and small holes all over the roof, so that roof had to be completely redecked. So wood like that, that's in that kind of condition, oftentimes has to be replaced or a new deck installed on top of it because the shingles have to have something that they can be nailed to. Or it could be that your current roof deck doesn't meet code where you live, and your roofer might be required to install a new deck to meet code so that it passes inspection. So if you only need to replace a few boards, then the cost for that's probably going to be pretty low. A couple $100, maybe $300, $400. But if you're needing to replace a lot of boards or you're needing to install a whole new roof deck, then that cost is going to be pretty high. It may actually end up costing several $1,000s, maybe $5,000, maybe $6,000 or more. And of course, all of that is going to depend on what the cost of wood is at the time that you need to have it done. If you remember back in 2020, a sheet of OSB went from $10 to $70. So that's going to have a major impact in the final price as well. Factor number 4, which is going to potentially cause an increase in the total cost of your project, is whether or not there's multiple layers of roofing material on your house. Now, it could just be that there's multiple layers of felt or underlayment underneath one layer of shingles, or it might even be that there's multiple layers of shingles on there. We've actually done some older homes here in our city that have had multiple layers of underlayment with a layer of wood shake shingles underneath 4 layers of asphalt shingles. Well, all that material has to be torn off and thrown into a dumpster and then taken off to the landfill. So that adds to the labor cost, and it also adds to the disposal cost because all of that extra material is adding extra weight. And when it gets taken to the landfill, they're charging by the amount of weight that's getting dumped at the landfill. So if this is the case on your house, it's going to depend on what it is that's having to be torn off. Like I said, is it just a couple extra layers of underlayment, or are there multiple layers of shingles on there? So the cost that it might add to your project could be just a few $100s, maybe $300, or it could, again, be like $2,000 or $3,000. All depends on what has to be torn off. The 5th factor that's going to affect your final re-roof price is access. And what do I mean by access? Well, can the delivery truck that's delivering the materials actually get close enough to your house where they can load the materials on your roof? Or if they can't, do they have to load the materials on the ground? Another factor that is going to affect whether or not they can get the materials on your roof is if your house is really steep, they're not going to try to put the new roofing materials on the roof. They're going to put those on the ground. Then if the materials are getting delivered to the ground instead of up on the roof, then somebody's going to have to hand carry all of that material up onto the roof. Of course, that's going to then increase the cost for labor to have somebody hand carry every single bundle up onto the roof. Or if the labor crew can't get their dump trailer close enough to the house where they can just throw the material off into the dump trailer, they have to throw it like down onto the ground and then hand carry it around to the dump trailer. Or again, if the roof is so steep that it's not safe for them to try to walk across the roof carrying loose material, then all that's got to go to the ground and be hand carried to the dump trailer. So all of this adds to the total labor cost to do your roof, and the cost depends on, how big your roof is, how much material is coming off, how much material has to be loaded up onto the roof. And realistically, this could add, again, a few $100s, let's say $300, or it might add $1,000 or more. Now that we've got all the variables out of the way, what's the bottom line? What's it going to cost to replace your roof this year? Well, first you need to remember what I told you about the increase in the prices of roofing material. That every year for the last 3 to 4 years, there have been 3 or 4 or 5 price increases in roofing materials every year. So the cost of replacing your roof at the end of this year could be quite a bit different than the cost of replacing your roof in the middle of this year. So in my opinion, if you're going to replace your roof, it's better to do it now rather than try to put it off until later. But what's the bottom line? Well, in my market where I work, to replace a roof, a standard roof, like I said, just a standard normal 1-story roof, it's not complex, there's not a lot of those other issues, costs between about $5.50 per square foot to $6.50 per square foot for a standard asphalt shingle. So that means that you could expect a baseline price of anywhere between about $13,000 to about $15,600 roughly. But to come up with your full project cost for your budget, don't forget to factor in those 5 variables that we just talked about. Hey, if you're getting ready to re-roof your house and you'd like to know what shingle I would put on my own house, click this video right here. And if you need some information on roofing in general, click this playlist right here.